We're in day 5 after the Paris terrorist attacks, and the hunt for suspects continues, with a raid this morning in Saint-Denis in northern France. With me is Sam Jones, our defense and security editor. Sam, what's the latest?
So, as you said, Roula, there's been a series of coordinated raids in Paris, North Paris, today, involving hundreds of police. They began in very early hours of this morning, and they are based on intelligence the French say they had that indicated that their most wanted suspect, a man called Abdelhamid Abaaoud, was in an apartment in Saint-Denis. They raided the apartment this morning. There have been 2 confirmed deaths. One of them was a female suicide bomber. A number of shots were fired that woke residents up in the morning. There's a brief siege, but as yet there's still no word on whether Mr. Abaaoud has been captured by the French or not.
Tell us a little bit about him. He's supposed to be the mastermind of this whole terrorist operation.
That's right, and I think we need to be a little careful. The term mastermind gets bandied about quite a lot. What does look to be clear is that Mr. Abaaoud was some kind of linking figure between ISIS in Iraq and their core leadership there and terror cells in Europe, particularly in Belgium and those in Paris. He has been connected with at least 2, possibly 3 other planned attacks in France this year.
But who is he? What do we actually know about him?
We know that he is a Belgian, naturalized Belgian, Moroccan origin, who travelled to fight with ISIS a few years ago and obviously made an impression there and became something of a figure within the organisation, within the foreign fighter community with ISIS, and particularly within the Francophone foreign fighter community. He has travelled back to Europe at least once, possibly twice, and as the raid indicates now, possibly a 3rd time. He was also sought out after the Charlie Hebdo attacks, but he was unable to be caught then, and he's given an interview to ISIS's in-house magazine, Debik, in which he lauds his credentials over the French and other European security agencies and says he was able to dodge them.
So what, I mean, this guy goes in and out of Europe, plots not 1, possibly 3 attacks. Why was he not on the radar screen of the intelligence services? How is this working?
He has been on their radar screen, and he is very much a high priority target for them. You would assume that they had been doing everything they could to get as much signals intelligence, that's tapping phone calls, bulk data collection from the internet, to ascertain both his whereabouts and to find who he was communicating with. Evidently there have been shortcomings there. Why that is, we don't know. It could well be because his use of encryption, of technologies that make it hard to listen to his conversations has thwarted intelligence agencies' attempts. But we do know that he was also targeted in strikes in Raqqa and elsewhere in Syria by the US-led coalition.
So let's talk about what's going on in Raqqa now, because the Russians have ramped up strikes on Raqqa and on other areas in Syria in the past 2 days. What exactly are they hitting, and what is behind this escalation?
Well, the Russians have launched 140 strikes. We don't actually know how many of those were on Raqqa. The Russians have consistently said they're hitting ISIS, they're hitting terrorists in Syria, but the reality is that very few of their targets have been terror groups, or at least what Washington and the West would consider terror groups. Instead, they've been more moderate rebel groups, because the Russians' core aim is to prop up the regime of Bashar al-Assad. The Russians do appear, however, to have shifted tactics slightly. They are striking ISIS much more than they were, and clearly there is a diplomatic effort to try and galvanise this and try and, bounce Russia into a position where it is part of the anti-ISIS coalition and is doing its job in hitting the terrorists as well as supporting Mr. Assad.
Many thanks, Sam. Please go to ft.com for the latest news and analysis from Paris and around the world.